because everybody is asking that, okay, the disengagement has started. This is seen as a diplomatic breakthrough. But what about those several reports which said that huge land grab has happened at China's behest, and China has been indulging in that?
Oh, so, Neelu, I cannot answer for what the Prime Minister should say, but I think we should make it absolutely clear that the actions that China took in 2020 are just not acceptable. On the issue of the opposition leaders being briefed, I think in a democracy it's important that all political parties, particularly on matters of national security, are briefed. I know there was some briefing done in Parliament on when the Pangong withdrawal took place, uh, but frankly, I don't know. We don't even know what the exact contours of this patrolling agreement are. Let me also say I don't think we can completely get back to normal because there is a breakdown of trust that is there between the two sides. Additional soldiers have got pushed in. There is a great deal of suspicion about Chinese activities. So suddenly all that is not going to disappear, even if some patrolling arrangement comes. That will take a long time to heal. The second and third steps are going to take time. I mean, the additional troops that have come in, the additional infrastructure that has got constructed, all that is not going to disappear. Nor is the Indian Army, and I'm sure, going to de-induct all its forces and come back to pre-2020 deployment levels. That is not going to happen. On your other point, let me say, as I said, everything is not going to go back to pre-2020 situation. There is a great deal of mistrust, at least on our side, on what China did. I think, as I said, at the political level, particularly on issues which are critical for national security, there needs to be a bipartisan kind of approach, which means that all political parties, irrespective of whether they are in power or in opposition, are on the same page, and they will be on the same page only when they are regularly sort of briefed about what is happening. Until new measures are put in place, unless we see China really taking steps not to aggravate the situation along the LAC, I think the next two steps, which are de-escalation and de-induction of troops, is not going to take place in a hurry. And I think that's the advice that the military will also give the government. So,
Hello and a warm welcome to HW News Network, your one-stop show, truth be told, for some engaging and thought-provoking conversations. Now, 4.5 years after the standoff between India and China, New Delhi and Beijing have agreed on the disengagement on the border, where about 50,000 to 60,000 troops are stationed on both sides. Now, what Vikram Mistry, who's a foreign secretary, yesterday claimed that Indian and Chinese diplomatic and military negotiators have been in close contact with each other in a variety of forums. And as a result of these discussions, the agreement has been arrived at on the patrolling arrangements along the line of actual control in the India-China borders, which means that we'll go back to the position of 2020 when the Galwan clashes happened. Now, what does this patrolling arrangement mean? Is it something very, very concrete by which India will gain, or is it just a chest thumping exercise ahead of Prime Minister Modi's BRICS summit visit? Joining me now is a very special guest. General Deependra Singh Hooda joins us. And let me tell all the viewers that he's been the former general officer and commanding in chief of the Indian Army's Northern Command, and he was also the Northern Army commander during the surgical strikes in September 2016. So thank you so much for joining on HW News. It's wonderful to have you on a program on a day when lots of questions are being raised. What does this patrolling exercise mean? And all of a sudden, this announcement came. Nobody knew that there were several rounds of talks, the diplomatic and military talks, though everybody knew that it was happening, it was in process, but it seems that nobody was kept in the loop. And all of a sudden, you have a foreign secretary who announces just a day ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Kazan, where the BRICS summit is going to happen. Now, how do you read this patrolling arrangement which is being announced?
So, Neelu, firstly, thank you for inviting me to your show. It's a great pleasure to be here. So, let me just sort of step back a bit to give you a little background so that there is a little better understanding. So, there were several areas, when these actions by the PLA in May 2020 took place. There were intrusions that took place in several areas along the border in Eastern Ladakh. A number of these places, disengagement has occurred because buffer zones have got created. What buffer zones means is both sides have pulled back and created an area between them so that the forces are separated and there is no patrolling happening in those buffer zones. So that arrangement took place at Galwan, at the north bank of Pangong, so areas like Patrol Point 15, 17, etc. The two areas where there was an ongoing standoff were Depsang and Demchok. And what was happening, particularly in Depsang, is that there was a small party of the PLA which had come inside and was blocking our move to our traditional patrolling points. And so that was, in fact, has been a sort of, as I said, a major sticking point since the past 2 years. And India has been insisting that we should be permitted to patrol to areas that we were doing before 2020. And from what it appears although they've not given out the exact contours of what is going to happen, is that there has been an agreement, there's been some kind of patrolling arrangement, which will permit us to patrol areas that we had patrolled prior to May 2020. So in some ways, I will not say it's a restoration of status quo, but the situation goes back to pre-2020 when we were patrolling these areas. So, Neelu, I take this as a positive step. So it's not merely something that is a minor sort of move forward, but I think it's a significant and major step that is happening.
No, but would you? It could, after 4.5 years of standoff, this you are saying it could be it's a major significant step. But would you call this as a diplomatic breakthrough between the two nations?
So, Neelu, what you see, the position that India had taken was that we cannot have a situation which is ongoing on the border and then say that the ties are normal. So there was, and I think it was the foreign minister's statement in which he called the ties as quote unquote abnormal. China, on the other hand, had been saying, look, let's keep the border issue aside and let's move on with improvement in ties in other areas. Uh, Now, and we have to see how this whole process unfolds. But if there is, disengagement which happens along the border, things become a little better, then it could lead to, sort of mending the ties which had been sort of, broken after the 2020 incident. So it could be the start of, start to mend the ties if the border situation becomes normalized.
No, but what happens to the land grabs, reports of land grabs by China? Now, are we going to see a situation where Prime Minister Modi, during his bilateral talks, will he tell China in clear, simple words that, look, this is what China has done in terms of land grabs? We want our land back. Now, is there going to be some plain speak on this particular issue? Because everybody is asking that, okay, the disengagement has started. This is seen as a diplomatic breakthrough. But what about those several reports which said that huge land grab has happened at China's behest, and China has been indulging in that?
Also, Neelu, I cannot answer for what the Prime Minister should say, but I think we should make it absolutely clear that the actions that China took in 2020 are just not acceptable. Uh, this whole issue of major land grab that has happened, they did come into various areas, but that's the whole point of this exercise that is being taken over the last 4.5 years, that they return to where they were prior to 2020. So the areas that they had entered, and some areas they have vacated. So we know, for example, in the north bank of Pengong, so they have vacated the areas that they had come into, and in some other places they have stepped back. As I said, a major chunk of territory was Depsang, and now we have to see exactly, as I said, what the contours of the patrolling arrangements are and what do they mean. Uh, but if we are able to go back to where we were traditionally patrolling, means that the Chinese would have to pull back behind that line.
No, but we do not know the terms of agreements on what this breakthrough has happened. Neither the Prime Minister and nor the Foreign Secretary or Mr. S. Jaishankar have discussed this with the opposition leaders. And if you speak to the opposition leaders, they say that they should have informed the opposition. They should have consulted the people before. And the Prime Minister is going for a BRICS summit, and he doesn't even inform that he's getting into a bilateral talk like this before this kind of a breakthrough, and all of a sudden this announcement is made. So what would you make of this of these claims which are made by the opposition?
So look, in fact, if you recall a few days back, even from the Chinese side, there was a statement saying that we are coming close to an agreement on the issue of the opposition leaders being briefed. I think in a democracy, it's important that all political parties, particularly on matters of national security, are briefed. I know there was some briefing done in Parliament on when the Pengong withdrawal took place. Uh, but frankly, I don't know. We don't even know what the exact contours of this patrolling agreement are. And once that is known, so I'm seeing some media reports saying that not only Ladakh, but this could also extend to the eastern sector, because we've had some clashes also in the eastern sector.
Right. But so since you yourself are saying that nobody knows the contours of this patrolling arrangement, then how can we really call it a diplomatic breakthrough? Is the government really tom-tomming its little efforts? It simply looks like a chest thumping exercise until unless you share the contours of the arrangement. How do people believe that what the government is saying is right?
So, Neelu, uh, once agreements are arrived at the diplomatic level, then the military commanders on the ground will meet. They will discuss how exactly things are going to work out. So I think, in my view, it's a little premature to expect every detail to sort of come out, because a lot of discussion will have to take place on the ground between military commanders to see how exactly it will, where we are patrolling. But if an agreement in principle has been agreed to by the two sides, I would say, Neelu, it is a breakthrough, because this is what had been plaguing us for the last 4.5 years.
No,
At
but
many places, we had come to an agreement.
no, but last time also, if you remember, we were told, and the entire nation was told that look, there is an agreement happening. But then gradually we saw buffer zones developing. So there is an element of suspicion. Then how do you really believe when you haven't seen the terms of the contours of the agreement, and we call it a diplomatic breakthrough as if something very big has happened?
So, you know, uh, terms that are used, in diplomacy and by political leaders, setting that aside, I'm just looking at it sort of practically to say that uh, this was a sticking point. Depsang particularly was a sticking point and not easy to resolve. And so, if we have come to some kind of an arrangement agreement there, even if it is in principle and to be decided later between military commanders, I would still say it's a step towards trying to normalize the situation along the border. Let me also say I don't think we can completely get back to normal, because there is a breakdown of trust that is there between the two sides. Additional soldiers have got pushed in. There is a great deal of suspicion about Chinese activities. So suddenly all that is not going to disappear, even if some patrolling arrangement comes. That will take a long time to heal.
You yourself said, so I was listening to you carefully. You said that things will not go back to normalcy fully. Now, the thing is that, three things are required to end any kind of standoff. And I've been listening to various experts who've spoken on this issue. The first thing, of course, is the disengagement. Second is the de escalation. And then the third point is the de induction of the rival forces. Now, only the first point has taken place. What about the other two things? Till the time the other two things are complete, how would you really say that things have come back to normal? And again, coming back to the same, though I'm sounding very repetitive, but then the press conference, which was conducted by Vikram Misri yesterday, as if that something very very big has happened. The entire legacy media and the conventional media went hammer and tongs over this, that look, there's something very big which has happened. And even though China had not made any such announcement, so did we look like fools? Did we sound like fools just because Prime Minister Modi is going to a BRICS visit and you're trying to prepare a ground as if everything is all right between India and China?
No, Neelu, as I said, and as you pointed out, this is the first step. The disengagement from areas where people were in close proximity. My own personal viewpoint is that the de-escalation and de-induction is going to take some time. But at least the first step has been taken. So, which is why I'm not completely dismissive, because the first step hadn't been taken, that you could move to the second and third. The second and third steps are going to take time. I mean, the additional troops that have come in, the additional infrastructure that has got constructed, all that is not going to disappear. Nor is the Indian Army, and I'm sure, going to de-induct all its forces and come back to pre-2020 deployment levels. That is not going to happen. So those are things that over a period of time will need to be discussed. I think we will also need to put in place additional confidence building measures, because they have all broken down after what China did in 2020. But unless you take the first step, how do you take the second step? So at least the first step has been taken.
No, you are right in a way that the first step has been taken, but does India still need to be cautious of China's moves? We've seen China going back and forth. They'll say something else, do something else behind your back. So until unless there is no physical verification so far that what China is saying, we need to verify from our ends. If you remember, in Ladakh and elsewhere, there have been several reports where the people went to the borders and they said that the grazing land has been lost because China has encroached on those territories. So my point is that if at all Prime Minister Modi is meeting President Xi Jinping bilaterally, will he point out at these things? Or is it just enough to, feel good about the fact that, okay, the first step has been taken and now let me keep quiet, let me resume the trade and the commerce, which was stuck. I mean, and he returns back saying that, okay, everything is hunky-dory.
No, Nilu, as I said, I cannot answer for Prime Minister Modi and what he is going to do. But certainly, I mean, the meeting is going to take place in the backdrop of the situation that has existed for 4.5 years. And I'm sure this issue will get discussed. I mean, it can't be that the issue will not get discussed. On your other point, let me say, as I said, everything is not going to go back to pre-2020 situation. Uh, there is a great deal of mistrust, at least on our side, on what China did. We are not going to just accept anything that they say. Verification processes and strong verification processes have to be put in place. We have seen China's practices in the past, and then of course 2020 was a major sort of setback for us. So I'm sure on the ground you will find verification processes. You will not find the same level of trust and confidence that existed. We have to be wary about China. We just cannot take them at face value.
Right. You've made an important point, and it's quite a clincher where you say that you cannot take China at the face value. You need to be wary, you need to be cautious of their next move. Now, according to you, I mean, you worked on the ground and you know the ground realities much better than anybody understands. What could be the challenges in the days to come, for the army, for the military, for the diplomatic commanders from Indian side?
So I think the challenges are just to make sure that your posture on the border is strong as far as we are concerned. At the diplomatic level, as I mentioned earlier, how is it that confidence can be restored? I think we'll have to renegotiate some of our confidence building measures. The agreements we had in 1993, 96, 2013, those agreements are literally gone through the window. So we will need to renegotiate those. And I am convinced that we will continue to build our military capabilities along the line of actual control. that actions have started, and we need to continue with that. As I said, uh, with trust having broken down, and I think today the army chief also made this mention that one of the key elements is restoration of trust between the two sides, and that's going to take a long time. I mean, these things don't happen just because you reached an agreement on patrolling. That suddenly trust will get reestablished. That's not going to happen.
No, but if you see China's moves, if there is one step forward, they take three steps backwards, And what is the guarantee that China doesn't do this flip flop again? They might just do repeat it, maybe not this month because of the feel good exercise or whatever everybody is feeling about that there's a major diplomatic breakthrough and as this first step has been taken. But what if anything, happens next month, which is
Yeah,
not
yeah. So
acceptable?
absolutely, we have to be absolutely wary. I mean, prior to 2020, did anyone think or imagine that China is going to carry out such major military actions along the line of actual control? No, and that was because we thought diplomacy is working, political engagements are working, everything is quiet and calm on the borders. But 2020 has been a very rude shock, I know, and therefore, as they say, need to keep the powder dry.
But this new patrolling arrangement will mean what if you look at the things at the ground level? That we go back to our regular patrolling exercise at Dipsang and Demchok? Or does it mean that and China will not intervene, not object? There won't be clashes like what happened in 2020?
So again, I'm only seeing what is being reported in the media. So the process that they're talking about is that India will patrol to its traditional patrolling points that it used to do in the past, and so will China carry out patrolling to its traditional patrolling points. They will decide on a frequency, and so mutually decided on both sides, so that the patrolling happens on different days, so that you are not coming into contact with each other's patrol. So the attempt, I think, is to try and make sure that two patrols don't come in contact with each other, which is I think logical if you can come to that kind of arrangement.
No, but the opposition has been asking for many, many answers, from the Modi government that in that after 2020 clashes, Modi ji said, na koi aaya tha, na koi aaya hai. And that was, despised by the opposition. They said that that was not a very convincing answer. Everybody is suspicious that, the government is silent about few things when it comes to China. Now, what happens to the military commanders when all the talks, when the plain speaking is not happening between the two leaders, and is it not a setback on the ground for the military leaders?
On the ground, the military knows what its task is and what it has to do. It also knows the ground situation and exactly what has happened and how they need to react to that. I think, as I said, at the political level, particularly on issues which are critical for national security, there needs to be a bipartisan kind of approach, which means that all political parties, irrespective of whether they are in power or in opposition, are on the same page, and they will be on the same page only when they are regularly sort of briefed about what is happening.
No, but that's
Everybody
not happening.
everybody
That
has national security at heart. Yeah.
General
Sorry.
Hooda, this briefing is not happening. Like I spoke to many opposition leaders, and they said that if this bilateral meeting was supposed to happen at the BRICS summit, at least the Prime Minister or somebody from the BJP should have called an all-party meeting, briefed us all, because there were many, many pending answers which the government hasn't given. And now the Prime Minister goes ahead and does a talking with a bilateral talk with Xi Jinping. Now, how does the opposition react then?
So
Are
I
we
can't answer.
keep quiet?
No, I can't answer for what the government uh, does or what the opposition point is. My clear sort of understanding is that on this issue and on national security issues, there needs to be greater coordination, cooperation, communication, between the government and the opposition. That's all. Why it's not happening? I mean, really, that's not. I'm in no position to answer that.
No, but the opposition consistently has been trying to ask that, what is the helplessness of the Modi government when it talks to China? Why are they so helpless? When it comes to Pakistan, there's so much of plain speak. There's so much of chest thumping. Surgical strike happened. But when it comes to China, the government becomes mute and very huddled up, as if they're trying to hide something.
Yeah, so I think initially they did try and sort of hide it or play it down. I mean, that we know that when the government made these statements about there has been nothing that has happened and nobody has intruded. If nobody had intruded, then why is it that we having so many rounds of political, diplomatic, and military commanders meetings? So obviously there was an attempt to underplay it at that stage. Why do they look at these two adversaries differently? Did they think that it could have been resolved? We've had situations in 2013, 14, then 2017 in Doklam, and they were quietly sort of resolved. So, did the government think that is the best approach and it could be quietly resolved? But as we know, I mean, the actions of 2020 were completely different from what had happened earlier. So, yes, the government was taken a bit by surprise. Should they have acted differently? Is frankly, for people like you and historians to to answer in the future.
No, but General Huda, isn't this a very natural question? And as a journalist, you are curious to know as to why this approach towards China has failed. Why are we not able to tackle China? There could be many reasons, but you being a person who's worked on the ground, what do you feel that what has really gone wrong with our approach towards China, or if I may call a policy towards China? Why are we failing there? Why are we helpless in tackling the situation?
So let me talk of the policy and the helplessness part. We will talk about sort of subsequently. Prior to 2020, the thinking was China will not use military force. They will not carry out any military coercion. Uh, Trade is booming, economic ties are there. We have all these agreements that are in place. We had a large number of meetings at the highest political level between political leaders of both sides. So I think the sense was that China will not use military force, to along the border. And I think that notion has been rudely broken after 2020. Uh, are we helpless in dealing with China? I won't say so. I mean, if you look at yes, there was the initial surprise. Yes, there were the initial casualties at Galwan, etc. But I think on the ground, the military has reacted rather firmly to what has happened, and we have not said that we will accept, the status quo, and that we will accept what China is doing on the border. We have stuck to our guns. Actually, look at the additional troops that got pumped in, the infrastructure that got developed. Additional forces were put on a defensive deployment. The Kailash Range occupation that happened in 2020. So it's not as if on the ground there has been any weakness in dealing with the Chinese. Even subsequently, you saw
Maybe what
at
you're saying.
Yangtze.
No, as far as the military is concerned, maybe there is no helplessness, from the military's end. But the government looks and sounds very weak-kneed. Because when it comes to dealing with Pakistan, we see the chest thumping, we see that jingoism, we see that loud speaking. But when it comes to China, why are we so muted? And I know you would say that I can't speak on the government's behalf, but as a lieutenant general who's dealt with the situation on the ground, how do you really feel when you see this kind of an approach by a government, and a government who claims that they're very, very strong, they're powerful enough to deal with any kind of situation, but when it comes to China, they are all silent and muted?
Yeah, so it depends on who the adversary is. So Pakistan is a smaller state. It has weaker military capability. Uh, we know we can do things against Pakistan. China is a much more powerful adversary. It's a very strong military. It's economically a very strong country. It has more tools at its disposal than than Pakistan has. So I'm not sure we can completely take the same approach in dealing with these two adversaries. We'll have to look at how to deal with China differently from how we deal with Pakistan.
Now, in the days to come, when Prime Minister Modi returns back from the BRICS summit, how do you think the things would unfold? Are we going to hear the government saying that look, all is hunky dory between India and China? We return back to the same position where we were, and because I'm just imagining what the legacy and the conventional media is going to say, like what they did yesterday. The whole day, the only news which was carried out was that the big disengagement exercise between India and China. Whereas even you've admitted during the course of this program that it's just the first step, and there is a lot of trust deficit which still needs to be worked upon.
Yeah. So it would be, I would say, it would be wrong for the government to say that everything is now back to normal. I'm saying this quite plainly because I don't think anything can get back to the pre 2020 normalcy. So the additional troops are still there. There is mutual suspicion. There is mistrust on both sides, and this can lead to some kind of local incidents, even if you might try to do what you want. So until new measures are put in place, unless we see China really taking steps not to aggravate the situation along the LAC, I think the next two steps, which are de-escalation and de-induction of troops, is not going to take place in a hurry. And I think that's the advice that the military will also give the government. So, yes, it's a good first step, but let's not say that we are back to normal.
Right.
And plus, there is the larger strategic picture. I mean, India and China as two rising powers in Asia. We know that China will make an attempt to stymie India's rise, and they are doing it through influence in South Asia, through propping up Pakistan. That is not going to stop. And so, certainly, I mean, those issues will have to be kept in mind in our future engagement with China.
Last two questions. Some magazines have reported that, some websites rather, that, India is trying to send out a message to Canada and US by doing this bilateral meeting with Xi Jinping. Now, how far do you think that could be the reason behind, why there is so much of official announcement followed by a bilateral meeting, which they've been trying for? That's true that they've been, these several rounds of talks have been happening between the diplomatic and the military commanders. But coming as it does, I mean, there is a suspicion that, Canada has been flexing its muscles over Lawrence Bishnoi and all what is happening. I'm not getting into those details. US has also tried to send out a stern message to India. So by this bilateral meeting, do you think that India is trying to send a message to Canada and US as well? Because they will have their eyes quite keen on what's going to happen between Modi and Xi Jinping.
Look, I don't think, I wouldn't subscribe to this view. I mean, let's not link everything. India has been trying to sort out the problems along the border. And so I think it's just a part of that process that if the border situation is sorted out, and India has made that statement, that then we can move along to sort of repair our ties. I also think the manner in which the trajectory of India-US ties has gone, and India-US ties have become much stronger over a period of time, and it's from mutual interest of both sides. I think they stand in their own place. So I'm not sure those ties are going to get impacted at all. As far as things with Canada are concerned, whether there's a bilateral meeting or not, I think the way the ties have nosedived, it will take a lot to get them back on track.
Right. One last question before I wind up the interview with you, that whether the bilateral meeting happens or it doesn't happen, the very fact that Vikram Misri made an official announcement about the disengagement process and the patrolling arrangement, do you think that once the Prime Minister returns back from Kazan after after the BRICS summit is over, he should come and have an all-party meeting, discuss it with the opposition leaders as to what has happened really?
As I said, I think he should. I think the government should take the opposition. You see, dealing with China is not only an immediate issue; it's an issue that's going to impact, the future of India's rise. It's going to impact India's national security to a very large extent. So, as I said, it would be good if everyone sits together and takes a bipartisan approach to how to deal with the China challenge in the future.
True. Thank you so much for joining on HW News. It was wonderful having you on the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Neelu. Thank you very much.
Stay ahead with our cutting edge news app. Instantly access the latest shorts in just 1 minute and breaking news in just 50 words. Download now for a smarter, faster news experience.